For nearly a decade, there was only one man who could genuinely shake Phil Taylor's confidence. One player who on his day was unstoppable. Raymond van Barneveld wasn't just a great darts player, he was a movement. Before him, darts was just another British pub sport. After him, it was primetime TV in the Netherlands with sold-out arenas and millions watching at home. And the way he played? Effortless power, silky smooth throwing and an unmatched presence at the oche. But here's the crazy part. If just a few key moments had gone differently, Barney might have been even greater than he already was. Raymond van Barneveld wasn't just a 5-time world champion, he was the first player to truly challenge Phil Taylor's reign. He wasn't afraid, he wasn't overwhelmed, and in 2007, he did something that few thought was possible. He beat Prime Taylor on the biggest stage in one of the greatest matches of all time.
Tops he wants. And he gets it! Barneveld is the champion of the world!
He goes Eric Bristol's 5-title record! What a player!
What a player! What a comeback! What a match!
The Barney story isn't just about winning titles, it's about revolutionizing an entire sport. He turned the Netherlands into a darts powerhouse, built a fan base unlike anything the game had seen, and inspired a new generation of players who still carry his influence today. So today, we're going deep into his prime, his dominance, his greatest battles, and why he could go toe-to-toe with Taylor when almost nobody else could. But before we get into all that, we need to start with the moment that changed everything. The match that made Raymond van Barneveld a household name. Raymond van Barneveld was just another unknown player grinding his way through the ranks. He wasn't a teenage prodigy. He wasn't someone people expected to change the sport. In fact, by the time he started making a name for himself, he was already in his late 20s, an age when most future greats had already won something big. But when Barney arrived, he did it in style. His breakthrough moment came in the 1995 BDO World Championship, where he made an unexpected run to the final. Nobody saw it coming. He wasn't a top seed, he wasn't the favourite, and yet, there he was, on the biggest stage of his life, facing darts legend Richie Burnett for the world title. It was supposed to be a coronation for Burnett. Instead, Barney gave him a war. The Dutchman forced the match all the way to a deciding set, pushing Burnett to the absolute limit before finally falling short. And while he lost that day, something had changed. People had noticed him. 3 years later, Barney was back. This time, he wasn't leaving empty-handed. In 1998, he faced Burnett again, but this time, there was no heartbreak. Barney controlled the final, closed out the match, and lifted his first World Championship trophy, the first for any Dutch player in history. And with that win, everything changed.
Double 8, 2 darts 4, does he need them? Can he do it in one for the title? It's there! It's there! Look at him, Ray Barneveld! He's crying! Ray Barneveld!
In the Netherlands, darts exploded. The sport went from being a niche hobby to a national obsession. Television ratings skyrocketed. Dutch fans started filling up arenas, and it was all because of one man, Raymond van Barneveld. But while he was dominating the BDO, something was brewing in the PDC. The level of competition was rising, the prize money was getting bigger, and Phil Taylor was untouchable. And soon, Barney would have to make a choice. Stay in the comfort of his kingdom, or step into the lion's den and take on the greatest of all time. Raymond made it look effortless. His throw was one of the smoothest the game had ever seen. No jerky movements, no unnecessary adjustments, just a fluid, controlled release that sent darts gliding into the treble 20 like they belonged there. When Barney was in rhythm, it felt like he could stand at the oche all day and never miss. But what made him truly special wasn't just his mechanics, it was the way he handled moments. Some players thrive in early rounds, racking up easy wins before crumbling under the pressure of a final. Not Barney. When the stakes were at their highest, he played his best darts. That's why he won 5 world titles across 2 different organizations, 4 in the BDO, and then his legendary PDC world title in 2007. And it wasn't just the titles, the stats back it up. One of the highest TV averages ever recorded at his peak, a 9-dart finish on the biggest stage, major tournament wins across 3 decades. Barney wasn't a flash-in-the-pan champion, he had longevity. But as good as Barney was, there was always one man standing in his way, and when they finally clashed, it gave us one of the greatest matches in darts history. For over a decade, Phil Taylor was untouchable. The gap between him and everyone else wasn't just wide, it was a canyon. World-class players would step up, play the best darts of their lives, and still get steamrolled. But then came Raymond van Barneveld. Barney wasn't intimidated, he wasn't overwhelmed. And unlike most of Taylor's opponents, he didn't step onto the stage hoping to win. He stepped up expecting to. The moment that defined their rivalry came in the 2007 PDC World Championship final, a match so intense that even Taylor admitted later that he felt genuine pressure. Taylor came in as the favourite, as always. He had already won 13 world titles, and most expected him to make it 14. Barney, meanwhile, was still adjusting to life in the PDC after making the jump from the BDO just a year prior. But from the start, it was clear. This wasn't going to be another Taylor masterclass. The match was a dogfight. The two traded sets, both averaging over 100, hitting massive finishes and refusing to back down. The tension in the arena was unreal. And then, after nearly 2 hours of elite-level darts, it all came down to a sudden death leg. One leg to decide the World Championship. Barney won the ball, threw first, and produced one of the most clutch legs of his life. He outlasted Taylor. He outplayed Taylor. And when that final dart hit double 20, he beat Taylor. The streak was broken. The greatest player of all time had been taken down at his peak. For the first time in years, Taylor looked beatable. And Barney, he had just cemented himself as one of the greatest players to ever step up. But while Barney had the talent to go toe-to-toe with Taylor, there was something holding him back. Something that stopped him from taking over completely. Because while Taylor had an ironclad mentality, Barney had doubts. And those doubts would cost him more than just a few matches. They'd cost him a shot at being the undisputed best player in the world. Van Barneveld had the talent, he had the throw. But what he didn't have? The unshakable mentality that kept Taylor at the top for 2 decades. And that's what held him back. Barney was a confidence player. When he felt good, he was unstoppable. But when things started to go wrong, those small cracks in his mindset turned into huge gaps. And once those doubts crept in, his game suffered. You could see it in his body language. Unlike Taylor, who stared straight ahead like a machine, Barney wore every emotion on his face. When he was struggling, you knew it. He'd shake his head after a bad dart. He'd sigh, slump his shoulders, mutter to himself. And his opponents, they fed off that. And that inconsistency showed up in his results. One week, he'd take down a world-class field and look like the best player on the planet. The next, he'd crash out early, barely resembling the same guy. That's what made him so frustrating to watch. You knew he had the ability to dominate, but unlike Taylor, who maintained his level year after year, Barney's form came and went like the wind. By the early 2010s, a new wave of players, Michael van Gerwen, Gary Anderson, Adrian Lewis, was rising. And while Barney still had moments of brilliance, they were moments, not eras. Then came the retirement roller coaster. Barney retired, then unretired, then retired again, then made a comeback. It was a pattern. Every time he walked away, it felt like he wasn't really done. And every time he returned, it felt like he was chasing something that had already slipped away.
Of course. I know I retired because I wasn't myself anymore. The last years in my career were bad, private problems, and I said I'm going to give up because I'm a nightmare for everyone around me. And then a couple of months later, Corona was there. I couldn't do any exhibitions, and I was divorcing and all. And I'm thinking, what to do next? I was bored.
But here's the thing: despite all the struggles, despite the inconsistency, Barney's legacy was already set in stone. Because no matter how many times he doubted himself, the impact he had on darts could never be erased. And that's what we're about to get into next. For all the ups and downs, all the moments of brilliance and the frustrating collapses, Raymond van Barneveld left behind something no slump or early exit could erase, a legacy that changed darts forever. Before Barney, the Netherlands could take or leave darts. It was a country where the sport barely registered. But after his breakthrough, it became a national obsession. They travelled to the UK in massive numbers, turning every major tournament into a sea of orange. And today, that legacy lives on through the players he inspired. Michael van Gerwen, one of the most dominant players of the modern era, grew up watching Barney. In interviews, he's admitted that without Barney, he wouldn't have picked up a dart. And he's not alone. Every top Dutch player that followed Danny Noppert, Dirk, Jeffrey de Zwaan all point back to Barney as the reason they started. But his impact wasn't just in the Netherlands. Barney brought something to darts that few players ever have: emotion. When he won, he felt it. When he lost, he felt it. He made fans care because they saw a piece of themselves in him. He wasn't a robotic, cold-blooded killer like Taylor. He was human. He doubted himself. He got frustrated. But when he found his rhythm, he produced moments of pure magic. And that's why, even though he didn't dominate like Taylor, even though he had stretches where he disappeared, he's still one of the most beloved players in darts history. Because greatness isn't just about stats, it's about impact. So, how good was prime Raymond van Barneveld? Good enough to shake Phil Taylor. Good enough to change the sport. Good enough to be remembered forever. And if you thought Barney's prime was crazy, wait until you see what Phil Taylor did to the sport, because that era was something else.